Hey everyone, real excited about this Grand Theft Auto 5 special request. I'm gonna try to get the game today. I'm so excited, it looks amazing. And want to thank all the new fans, all the new subscribers. I really mean it from my heart. I can't do this without all of you and this amazing support. Thank you so much everyone. I just can't thank you enough. This is a dream coming true. So all of you, this is for you. Thank you. And real quick before we start, I want to go over kind of break this down. This will be very helpful. What's so important before you draw is your mindset. You know, what you're thinking before you go into a drawing. And to me, there's 4 kind of ways you can approach a drawing. And this is just my opinion. There's no like books probably on it or anything, but this should help you a lot. Number 1, you have total creativity. That's when you're not looking at any reference, you're just drawing from your imagination. You know, you could use shapes, and look at my Batman Beyond video. It will go more in depth, but you know, you can use shapes, just outlines, however you want. That's creativity from the mind. Number 2 is, you know, you use a reference, yet you're still keeping it partially yours. In other words, I'm looking at a reference, yet I'm not copying the reference, yet I'm using parts. I can't even draw anything, I'm just going to talk. In other words, I'm using parts from that reference. Like, say if I draw an outline, I draw an awesome pose, but I don't know what Captain America's outfit looks like, so I use the reference and then I put it over. So it's kind of a mixture between creativity of the mind. You're not really looking at something directly, but you're putting something down, then you have to use a reference. Like if I drew another character, I don't know how to draw a gun, I'll use a reference. That's another way you can draw, you know, it's kind of a mixture. Third way, and this is so important, because if you go into a drawing thinking of these different categories or ways to approach it, I promise your drawings will get better, you'll become better. And it's all about mindset. It really is a huge, you know, drawing is a big thing about mindset and what you're thinking, like a lot of things. But thirdly, using a reference and you copy it, but you're not copying it line for line. In other words, what I'm going to do with this drawing here, the girl from Grand Theft Auto, I'm going to look at her and I'm going to copy the lines. I'm not going to use shapes. In other words, you know, if you usually start with a circle for a head and then a line coming down, you know, that's down in the ear here, you know, very basic. But when you're copying a reference, you usually don't want to use a circle because you can't see it. You're looking at an image, and rather you'd want to use the lines and you kind of map it out. And that's what I'm going to do with this drawing. You map it out. You map the basic shapes out. You map where forms are going. And you look at it, yet there's 2 kind of ways, and this is good. One is you're copying line for line, placement for placement. So you are basically studying an image or a still life or anything you're looking at, and you are literally copying line for line. Everything looks exactly the same. That's one way of drawing, and that kind of trains your mind to visually look, to visually observe, and that's very important, you know. And that's one way. But the other way, which is I prefer because it's more fun, you don't have to think in that way, you can have it more fun, is you look at the image, you draw it, like what I'm going to do here, but you're not worried about the exact placement. Like I'm not worried about where this hand's going to be or if it looks 100%. I'm just capturing a likeness, I'm getting it down and I'm doing it. So that's my little teaching on that, and let's get started with this. To start with this one, I'm going to first study the photo because it's a little more complicated. It's a realistic kind of thing. Now I'm going to start with, I'm doing it fairly small, I'm going to start with the face. And I hope that helps before everything I mentioned. But real sketch, I'm using a B pencil. I'm just making little marks here and there, and face. And this is going to be a long drawing because there's a lot. But I'm just starting with this very simple line. And like I said, I'm copying it, yet I'm kind of just looking at the paper too. It can be confusing. I hope it made sense. But all I'm doing is starting with this basic little line for the head, and you can see how it curves in. And you know, as you get better at drawing, and that's how professional artists are, they draw so many faces that they kind of know the basic shapes. And so if they're looking at a reference photo like what I'm doing now, I don't have to look at every single line because I kind of have an idea in my head of what's going on. And so right now I'm starting with this basic form, and I'm looking at the shapes. All I'm doing is breaking it down right now to simple shapes. And I'm starting with the face, and you can see this shape, and that's kind of what I teach a lot, is that, you know, if you really can draw, if you start to not look at the big picture of what you're drawing completely, but rather the shapes. And right now I'm just starting simple lines, and the hair kind of comes downward. So kind of like that. And this line doesn't arch inward so much. That's something I just noted. It kind of subtle, very subtle. Like that. That's very important. That's a basic profile face. Not going to mess too much around it, but I want to get proportions and lay the basic foundations. So the neck here, this hair comes out. And like I said, I know I keep reiterating, but it's very important to understand this. I am looking at it, but I'm not copying. I'm going to make it as in other words, I'm going to make it my own kind of style, but I'm going to definitely keep it where it's similar, where, you know, it looks like her. It's not going to, but like I said, I'm adding all little things here and there. So you got that, and just real light lines. I'm going to make this curve downward a little more. And for the neck kind of comes up. Put a line right there. There's where the lip is, and it kind of meets this line. You know, when you're doing this, you're only concerned about lines, where other lines intersect, where other lines meet. And you'll get better and better. And right now, like I said, it's very basic shapes. And another very important thing is, right here is where the phone's kind of going to be, so I'm going to put a big mark there. Another important thing is, remember, when you draw something, you have to keep in mind it is a drawing. It's, in other words, you know, I'm using an image that basically is like a digital painting, and, you know, I'm doing a drawing in pencil, so you always have to keep that in mind when you're drawing and stuff. I'm gonna move this over, this shape over just a little. Actually, I'll get the shape in later. Let's get more of this. So for this, you know, the muscle, you'd have the shoulder, which comes out here. And, you know, it's important too that you know basic anatomy. I need so much more practice when it comes to anatomy. And, you know, that's one of the criticisms I get, which, you know, I agree on, because I never had an anatomy course, or I never had the time to study it fully, you know. But this kind of comes outward here. And very important, notice how the head is this big. You know, I was talking about proportions. The rest of the body is almost this long. The whole body, you know, that's something that's hard. The bikini top just kind of comes in here. And once again, just get basic shapes. Don't worry about finished lines, finished details. Just basic shapes you want to work. And what I'm looking at from the drawing I'm using, see this line here where the eyes would be? Basically where the top of the bikini, it never crosses. Imagine an imaginary line there. It kind of comes right there, but it never crosses it. And that's what you got to do constantly when you're drawing using a reference and you're kind of copying it down. You're making little mental notes of where lines start, where lines begin, how big. Like right here, you know, you have another line, and it kind of comes, and in basic, very shapes. You're using shapes. There's a lot of mental things going on. That's what I love about drawing, because, you know, it's stimulating different parts of the brain. You're always thinking. It's like a constant thinking game. You're constantly observing. That's something amazing. Once again, I'm not. Notice how big this shape is. The bikini on this side. Notice it's almost as big as this whole face, and that's very important, because a lot of times, you know, a lot of artists, and that's something like I mentioned, I still need practice on, but a lot of times I will make a shape too big or too small, and that's I need a lot more work on proportions, but that's why it's important. Look how big this almost triangular with the bottom shape is. compared to the head. It's almost as big as this whole mass of the face, and that's important to keep in mind. And this kind of starts here. And like I said before, don't worry if you're not getting, this is what I stressed, and that's why I did that in the beginning of the video. Don't worry if you're not getting things line for line. That's not what you want to worry about. You want to worry about getting a basic figure, a figure that looks like her, and a figure that represents like a female body, and you're getting accurate proportions. That's what you want to be concerned with, and I can't stress that enough. And then the breast comes here and it kind of follows that line. It comes up almost to the chin. Oh man, it's coming along! Bam, 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 bam. There's the first one. I remember playing GTA 3. And this little arm comes out. And you can see now I'm just getting forms on the other side of the breast here. Comes in here. I may have actually made it a little bit too big. So no big deal. Just like that. Remember back here. But now let's start to really move a couple of forms. Real simple. And you can see another thing about drawing, and this is what, oh, I love to draw, man. Another cool thing about drawing is you will get the hang of how long you have to spend in each area. In other words, notice how long I took on that. I took around like the bikini part here. Notice how long I'm spending on this. Yet when you get to a simpler form, such as the way the torso is, you can do it fast because all it is a little outline shape, and you know it's a basic form. It's this big mass, and you know you don't have to worry about it as much, so you can kind of go through it. And then, in other words, it's all about pacing too. You know, you'll bounce around and you'll do more complicated things, and that'll take a little longer. But look how this form is coming up now. Real amazing. It's starting to show up. And once again, she might be a little thicker in terms of the torso than the original, or she might not. You know, that's. I'm sorry I keep reiterating it, but that's something I always do. I like to reiterate things a lot, so it really clicks because you know. The more the ears and brain hear something, the more it understands. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, baby. But like the more the ears and mind hear something, the more you're going to remember, and the more you're going to be like, oh, okay, that really does click now. And so look how long the torso is. Notice how this is about that long. Look how long that stomach is. That's so important. Look at that. It's about that long, and you're always using proportions. Look how small the head is. You know, and that's, you always want to get proportions. I can't stress that enough. And the more you draw, the more you observe, the better you'll get. And so you got that. We're not going to worry about that part. But the arm, let me make sure this shows up on camera. Cause, oh yeah. Oh yeah, baby. Then right here, this arm just kind of comes down, and you know she's making that peace sign. And with anatomy, usually the elbow, see how this kind of comes out at this point of the breast here, the arm. And this is why I love drawing like this, because it's very important to use figure references, like, you know, even if you take one of those nude classes, which I never took, but you know, it's very important that you study the figure, because then when you draw it from imagination, you will be better and better. And right now, like I said before, this is triggering all sorts of things in my mind right now. It's making me think about anatomy, about proportions, and I'm learning a lot by doing this. And that's why I recommend you kind of do this. I'm going to make that arm a little skinnier. She looks almost like a muscle woman. I am She-Hulk. I am the She-Hulk. Yeah, I'm going to make that a little skinnier here. But the point I'm getting at is, this is triggering lots of different mental things in terms of shapes, getting anatomy, and I forget my train of thought. But yeah, what I was saying is, you know, the more you do this, when you start drawing figures from your imagination, it'll be easier, and you'll have all these, lines and you'll remember all these. Oh yeah, that looks a lot. Oh yeah, baby, that looks sexy. Yeah. And then you'll have a lot more. You'll have a lot more in your mind that you remembered you drew, and that's very important. And that's something I do encourage. If you want to get better at drawing, I really do encourage you look at harder subjects and challenge yourself and really copy it, because you do learn a lot. Yet there's so many ways. I can't recommend one way. But for the hand, all I'm going to do is put a basic little shape. I'm not going to worry about the details. But, usually a basic hand shape gets wider at the end. And that's another thing, like I was just saying. In other words, I'm looking at the hand, yet I know what a hand kind of looks like. So I'm using a basic shape, and I'm not worried about it. But so far, that's that. Now let's get this phone in. This phone is huge, and the phone sits... Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. The phone sits about right here. And actually, I'm going to put the hand in first. Meaning that the hand's in front of it. So you can do this just the same way. Follow these basic lines I'm doing. I hope this looks good right now. I'm kind of looking. It's important to kind of get your framework done, and then we can start looking at the details, because right now it doesn't look like anything special. It looks like, what am I doing here? It looks kind of like I just said, what am I doing? But arm, basically arm shape is like a cylinder, and you got the deltoid here. And for a female, you want to make very subtle lines on arms. And then the elbow comes about right here. That's going to arch up. And she's got this huge, huge hand. But like I said, huge hand. You'll see how big it is. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, like I was saying, don't worry about right now. Simplicity, I'm sorry I keep pausing and things, but I just can't stress this enough. Simplicity for me helps me draw a lot better. When I add too many lines or too much detail to start, I kind of screw up. That's why right now, if you notice, I'm just doing very, very simple details, very simple outlines. And notice how this hand, like I said, it gets very big. And we'll go back. But notice how you can make a line right here, because that's kind of where the knuckles lean on. I'm not too worried about the hands in terms of a finished thing, but just the hands are almost as big as the face. Actually, this whole line stretches from the hand I'm not actually going to worry about that. Actually, I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to bend it in a little more. I'm going to make it come in a little more. Notice another thing, that when you're drawing from something, use negative space. In other words, see this little area right here? Look how small that is in the actual drawing itself. And that's why I just changed the way the arm's bending, because before I had it coming out too far, and being that it was too far, it didn't look like she had the camera in front of her. So that's something to note. Then these fingers. Now I got the hand. This hand is going to arch up, and I'm not going to worry about the final thing, but about a shape this big. This finger kind of comes over. It's a big shape, and this one, and then I'll go back to that. All I'm doing is roughing it in. But the phone, very important. The phone's going to be, it's seriously as big as the face almost, because it's in the front here. But something like that. We'll get back to a hand. I'm not doing anything special with it for now. Let's start in some detail and really kind of flesh this thing out.